Luno, the fastest, easiest way to buy Bitcoin. If you're just getting into crypto, it's the perfect place to start. Hey guys, and welcome back to the Layah Heilpern show. It is powered by Icon Plus Capital, the VC firm. So today is a really interesting topic. The world has gone pretty crazy recently. A kind of division that I haven't seen in my lifetime. So I'm going to delve into this with a good friend of mine. But before I do, I just want to let you know that this is, as usual, sponsored by BlockFi. You can get amazing interest rates with them. And I think around $250 when you sign up. And this particular episode is actually sponsored by Compass Mining. Huge thanks to them, because without them, obviously, we won't be able to make these amazing shows and really just like speak the truth. So Compass Mining, so they actually make Bitcoin mining accessible for everyone. You just buy your machine, pick a hosting facility, and let them do the work. So if you do want to start mining Bitcoin, then just head to compassmining.io. So let's start the show. Joining me today is the founder and co-host of Triggernometry. It is Konstantin Kisin. Konstantin, how are you doing?
I'm good, Layah. It's pronounced Konstantin, by the way.
Konstantin. I'm sorry I didn't get that fully right.
That's
how
all right.
Are you doing?
You're now officially racist. No, I'm good.
Oh my God, stop it.
I love it when people get into that mispronouncing people's names, how it makes you, it makes me laugh. But I'm good. It's good to be with you. We've been following each other for a while on social media. I really enjoy the stuff that you put out. Maybe you can explain to me what Bitcoin's all about. I think I told you in like 2011 or something, I bought half a Bitcoin for $400. And I was like, oh, whatever. I held on to it for about 3 or 4 years. And when I checked back into my account, it was worth twice as much as what I bought it for. So I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. I better sell this before this crashes. And so I got $800 for a Bitcoin. That's the extent of my experience with it.
Wait. I just need to press you on that. Sorry, yeah. How much Bitcoin did you say you had?
I had a Bitcoin.
Just one Bitcoin? Yeah. And you sold it for $800?
Indeed, I did.
I am so sorry.
It was $800. Yeah.
Oh my God, that is crazy. How do you feel about it?
Well, I'm Jewish, right? So how am I supposed to feel about losing money?
Stop! I hate I'm really bad with jokes like that. Okay, so I don't get offended easily, but yeah. I get really weird with jokes like that. I don't know why. It just makes me feel so funny. But I hear you.
Okay,
I'm with you. I'm with you.
Yeah, that's the whole point of jokes, to make people feel uncomfortable.
I actually agree with you. So before we delve in, I'm actually going to press you on this. Before we delve into it, just can you tell people about your background? Obviously, you're the co-host of the Triggernometry podcast. Great show. Watched it, love it. Tell people about it and also where it came from.
Well, so the long story short is that I'm originally from Russia. I was born in the Soviet Union in the early 80s. My parents sent me to boarding school in the 90s in the UK, when my dad was very briefly a sort of mini oligarch before he lost all his money. And that's why I ended up in the UK. I had to drop out of university because my family ran out of money, because actually my dad was, he was accused falsely of various things, and Russia had to escape Russia under a false name. And as a result of that, lost all his money. He was a minister in Boris Yeltsin's government at the time. And as a result of that, I actually ended up at university, halfway through university, not having enough money to even be able to carry on with my studies. Not only that, I didn't even have enough money to pay rent. And I ended up sleeping on the street for about 3 weeks in Scotland in the Scottish summer, before eventually, starting my own business with translation, which was what I did for about 10 years. Had a lot of success with that. I was probably, the #1 translator in my language pair and in my fields. I then started teaching other people the business skills of that particular industry, how to negotiate with clients. I studied a lot of psychology, NLP, hypnotherapy, all that sort of communication stuff, which I found very useful. And then I got very bored of it, because to me, the thing about life is I always want to be moving forward. And once you get to a point in an industry or in a field where it's like you've got nothing else to do, I kind of wanted to move on and be bad at something again. So I started comedy, and that's how I became a comedian in about 2014, 2015. I did that for a few years, and I very quickly realized that the industry I was now in was going in a direction that was very unexpected to me. So to me, comedy was always about challenging the narratives that we're being fed by the mainstream, about questioning things, about pointing out things that don't make sense about society and all of those sort of things. And I thought when I went into comedy, Layah, that is where people like me go. Like, if you want to push back, if you want to challenge things, you go into comedy. And what happened, I very quickly discovered actually that that's completely not true. Comedy is full of the most atrocious conformism and groupthink and herd mentality that you could imagine. And partly as a pushback to that, but partly also as a pushback to many other things that are happening in society more broadly, which I'm sure we'll talk about, I realized that I wanted to understand what was happening, because as a dark-skinned immigrant to Britain who voted Remain, who thought, you know, all this liberal stuff was great and blah, 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 what happened in 2016 for me was I've lived in this country for nearly over 20 years now, and people started saying to me, people who were my friends, people who I'd known for many years, well, the reason this country voted to leave the UK is that this is a racist country. And I was like, well, that's just not true. I just know that through my own experience. I'm not saying no one's ever been rude or bigoted towards me, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the country itself is racist, or that there are many people like that, right? I grew up in Russia, where there were plenty of stupid people who were prejudiced and bigoted against others. So to me, I just knew that wasn't true, right? That explanation of the things that started happening in 2016 was not accurate. And so my friend and co-host Francis Foster, who we do Triggernometry with, we were like, well, let's start a show where we try and understand, we talk to people who actually understand what's going on, why this particular thing happened, about what's going on. And that's really the genesis of Triggernometry, is two comedians asking questions in order to try and mitigate their own ignorance in some way.
I'm really fascinated by the fact that you said you went into comedy because you thought that is where people go to talk and express themselves, you know, and challenge the norm, because that is never, ever how I've ever perceived comedy. Comedy is, yeah, go on.
Well, I was going to say, you're probably a fair bit younger than me, so you may not have been around when people like Bill Hicks and George Carlin and other Richard Pryor, these are all probably before your time. And these were comedians who they were very funny, but the purpose of their shows was also to make you think and to make you question things. And if you get a chance to go back and have a look at some of their clips, you'll see that these are people who are really asking you to not buy into the system, to go, what is wrong with the picture? You know, whether it was, and it was on all sorts of issues. It was whether, you know, is the American dream really that realistic? George Carlin has a great bit about it. He has brilliant bits about the erosion of language, where he talks about how certain words are being substituted now. And again, I'm sure we'll talk about that. That is something that's happening in a very big way at the moment. You know, whereas Bill Hicks, he talked a lot about, for example, why, you know, he talked a lot about drugs. He was a guy who took drugs, he smoked, and he loved all of that. And he talked about how it seems like all the drugs that we're allowed to take, alcohol, tobacco, you know, I'm having a cup of tea right now, all the things that we're allowed to do, they are all things that allow you to function in the normal society and be a good drone. Right. Whereas the drugs that open your mind, the drugs that make you think creatively, the drugs that make you question, should I be going to a 9-to-5 job? Should I be taking orders from some boss I don't like? He was saying, well, maybe let's have a think about why that's happening. Right. So Bill Hicks was someone who was a bit more conspiratorial in his thinking. But the point was that he was someone who made you think and he made you question things. And he became quite iconic because he died very young. And so these were the people that inspired me to go into comedy. Whereas you, and this is the generational divide. You've probably grown up watching TV, loads of woke people ramming their crap down your throat on TV, because that's comedy. That's comedy, right? And you know, I feel so bad for you and your generation, because you've really missed out on what I think were the golden days of comedy. And maybe I hope that the pushback against this woke stuff that you've been watching on TV and people of your age have been, I hope the pushback against that generates a new golden age of comedy. I've kind of been rather hopefully predicting that would happen for some time. It's not
Yeah.
happening just yet, but it is starting to happen. People like Ryan Long and others doing comedy of a different slant. I think it will potentially be something in the future that I'm really excited about.
Yeah, I should take back that initial statement, because actually I'm a huge Charlie Chaplin fan. I think his work is so beautiful. It really speaks to me on like a humor level, but also on a spiritual level. The music as well. And yeah, of course, Charlie Chaplin totally, you know, stuck it to the man, stuck it to the system and everything. So no, you're totally right. So when for you did you think that shift really changed? Because really, if you know, you go into comedy and you think that this is all about questioning the establishment, and then suddenly it's actually not. And in my lifetime, from what I've seen, comedy is just a bunch of woke people, other than Michael McIntyre, who's excellent.
Brilliant.
You know, yeah, he stays away from that. You must have really noticed a change in society. At what point was that?
Well, I think, as we were talking about earlier, it was probably around Brexit and the election of Donald Trump that just seemed to explode people's heads. And look, I was someone, like I say, it was probably left leaning. I don't think I was ever woke, but I was certainly not, you know, on the far right or on the right or whatever all this nonsense is. I was just someone who. I've always thought that the most important thing in life is to make your own mind up about things, to look at the evidence, to judge things as you see them, to judge people as you see them, and not to allow yourself to get embroiled in other people's emotional incontinence about what's happening, right? And I think what we've seen over the last 5 years is that a lot of people, they want to do that. They want to see everything through the prism of, this is the worst thing that's ever happened. These people are evil. Anyone who disagrees with me is the worst possible person. I think social media obviously has a huge part to play in this. It's amplified the divisions and it made them deeper and more painful. So I think it was around those two triggers. I think Brexit and Trump really sent a lot of people absolutely nuts. And seeing that troubles me because, you know, growing up in the Soviet Union, and most of my family were in the gulags in one shape or form or another for the things that they said that they were not supposed to say, or for the wrong opinions that they had, or for something they'd done. To me, seeing a society descend into unthinking, seeing a society descend into this herd mentality where we're all like sheep and we're all supposed to follow some particular narrative because CNN or the New York Times or the Guardian or the BBC are pumping this stuff out. To me, that was very worrying. And it's the same thing now. And again, I'm sure we'll talk about it. When I see the unthinking when it comes to lockdowns and masks and whatever. Now, look, the pandemic is real. And of course, people have to take precautions and all of that. But when the science says, you know, masks don't seem to work, right? And in fact, one of the things I noticed straight away when the mask mandates came out was I predicted that it would actually make COVID easier to spread, because what happens when people put on masks is like when people put on bicycle helmets, they become more confident. And in the case of masks, it means they stop socially distancing. And it's the first thing that happened, right? So you've got this situation where people are making decisions based on what makes them feel good or makes them feel virtuous, as opposed to what's actually real. And that, to me, is very worrying, because I've seen societies descend, and I've read about societies, and my family has lived in societies that descended into this emotional thing that becomes a snowball effect. And people aren't, they're almost like their brain isn't there anymore. They're just part of some kind of big brain operation, and they're all following in one direction without thinking for themselves. And that bothers me a lot, Layah.
Yeah. It's like Yuri Bezmenov said, there's this like really famous clip, which I watch all the time. I'm slightly obsessed with this topic. But, you know, he sort of says, society won't know what is coming until you physically feel, you know, whether it's like the pain or, you know, just not to quote exactly, but until you're like taken to the gas chambers, basically. Like you won't know what is coming until it is literally there. So my question to you is, why is that this clamp down on, you know, freedom of speech, dialogue, conversation? Because I'll tell you this, you and I haven't said anything derogatory yet. We haven't said anything controversial just yet. And I can tell you,
come on, give me time.
Give you time. I can tell you for a matter of fact that my monetization on YouTube, just because of a few things we have said, will be limited. I will then have to actively request for it to be put back to normal, and it probably will because we haven't said anything bad. But it's just that. Like if we were talking about feminism and we were like, women are oppressed and we need to help the women, even help the Jews as well. I'm both Jewish, we can speak openly. Then it probably wouldn't be limited. But why is it starting, even with Brexit? Back then, for me, I do think Brexit was a key turning point in the UK when those divisions really started. Because obviously, just for the people who aren't British, I'm mostly an American following, the UK has always been very calm. It's been very calm. We never had huge tensions. Just another thing I'll say before is like, I remember when I was younger and I was maybe about 12 or 13, I remember when an election was going on, and I thought to myself, God, imagine living in the 60s when like your vote really mattered. Wouldn't it be really cool if your vote mattered? Wouldn't it be really cool to like protest and fight for something? Because now society is just boring. Years later, here we are. So this division, not being allowed to say things, where did that come from?
Well, there's a lot of different answers to that question because there are many. It's a complicated subject. There are technological factors. There are social factors, there are historical factors. So one of the things I think 2016 was really about, and Donald Trump, if you've got a mostly American audience, everything we say about Brexit will apply equally to the election of Donald Trump. I think 2016 represented working class people, mostly working class people, being fed up of being ruled by an elite that increasingly didn't care about their concerns. So as the jobs were being shipped off to China and the United States, as in the UK, people were coming in from Eastern Europe. And look, I'm an immigrant from Eastern Europe myself. I've got nothing against people coming to a different country and trying to make a better life for themselves. But when a large number of people come into a country in a short period of time, it causes tension, it causes downward pressure on wages, it causes people to lose their jobs, it causes competition for housing in a society which already has a problem with housing. So this was happening, but the elites, the people who were making the political decisions, their experience of those processes was completely different. Their jobs weren't being shipped off. Their jobs weren't being lost. Their wages weren't falling. They were getting cheaper nannies coming in from Eastern Europe and looking after their privileged kids. So, so the people making the decisions had lost touch completely with the majority of society, with ordinary people. And so to me, 2016 was an outcry from those people who were given for the first time in a long time an opportunity to say, enough. Listen to us as well. And I think that is what happened in 2016. And of course, the pampered elite who've had their hands on the tiller for all this time didn't like that. They didn't want people to be able to say what they say. And that's why they got all their trump cards out. The racism stuff, the bigotry, the xenophobia, all of that stuff became so big because it was a tool that they used to try and shut people up. So that's the political part of it. The technological part of it is, the truth is, we have created these platforms, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, etc., which they are like the printing press on steroids. And as I'm sure you will be aware, the printing press, when it was first rolled out on a mass scale, caused 200 years, 2 centuries of religious warfare, strife, conflict, intolerance, because suddenly people were able to question the narratives that they were being fed by their version of the mainstream media at the time, which was the priests, the aristocrats, etc. They were being told one thing, and suddenly you could read the Bible for yourself, right? And if you suddenly could find that there's nothing in the Bible about, bending the knee to your priest or whatever it was that, whatever it was that those divides were at the time. So to me, that the technological part of it is also a big part of it. And look, the technology is so immensely powerful that I don't think any of us have really worked out how it should be controlled or regulated, because, in the early days of the internet, it was a kind of wild, wild west. And while I enjoyed it, and to me that was fun, I also think that the world we live in now, to just say there should be absolutely no restrictions on anything on the internet is a little bit naive and impractical. That's also not going to happen, right? The ability to disseminate information that has very significant impacts on the real world is so huge now that I think what we're all struggling with is, how does that need to be controlled without infringing on people's rights, but also with an understanding of the tremendous power of these tools?
There's so much to uncover and break down, and as you talk, I'm like writing like words and things, and there's something that you spoke about. You touched on the church, right? So the church versus more information, which kind of took away their power. Something which is really a really interesting distinction, which I've noticed between the UK and the USA, is the USA has this patriotism for the flag and freedom and so on. That's kind of self-explanatory. In the UK, we're not really allowed to be patriotic. I don't know if you've noticed that as an immigrant or whatever, but we're sort of not really allowed to be patriotic here. And the way in which we show our patriotism is through our social services, our National Health Service, our NHS. And this is something which spooked me. So you can tell me how you feel about it. So during like the key moment of the lockdown last year, every Thursday night at 8 p.m., became a ritual. Everybody would go outside and clap for the National Health Service. Now, I found it odd because it's very like, number one, what does that do? It doesn't really do anything, okay? It kind of creeped me out because they can't hear you. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't add any value to it. And it's like groupthink. It's like doing something for no reason, doing something for the sake of doing it. And then it's like bowing down to a higher power, which you're actually not allowed to criticize in the UK. Like if you criticize the NHS, that is akin to criticizing the church back in the day. Is there something going on there? Like, what is up with that? Especially, we can move on to talking about the pandemic and everything that's going on and lockdowns and vaccine passports, because that obviously is a huge topic right now. But we are literally not allowed to have freedom of speech. Like, we are literally not allowed to say, hang on, why were NHS health workers, dancing on TikTok? If, whatever it is, you're just not allowed to say it. I wonder if you have any opinion on patriotism, the NHS being akin to the church in today's world.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpick there. There's quite a bit I disagree with you on, actually, in that. But so to me, the clapping for the NHS, I think I might have clapped a few times, but probably not very much. But to me, I don't have a problem in a pandemic with people giving nurses and doctors the feeling that they're extra appreciated in a time when there's an extra strain and an extra risk to being a worker in the NHS. I have many friends who are doctors and nurses. I personally didn't see that as a particularly nefarious thing. Where I would definitely agree with you, and I'm writing my first book called An Immigrant's Love Letter to the West. It was initially titled An Immigrant's Love Letter to Britain, and it's really all about this thing that you're raising, which is the inability to be patriotic. And George Orwell wrote about this way back when. He said, there's a certain thing that in Britain that among intellectuals, among the British intelligentsia, that they would rather be seen stealing from the poor box than standing to attention during the national anthem, right? There's this self-loathing that's always been very popular in Britain, which I don't understand. I'm probably more patriotic about Britain than most British people, because I think it's a great country, and I think it's to be respected. But look, there's a lot going on underneath the surface of that, and I think one part of that is there's a certain discomfort with the idea of patriotism because people have somehow tied it into like hardcore nationalism, and people think that if you love your country, that means you hate everybody else and you are against other people. And particularly in a multi-ethnic society as Britain is, there's this sort of feeling that somehow being patriotic about Britain is tied into being pro-white or somehow excluding of other minorities. So that's why people then seek these things like the NHS, because that's not something you can accuse of being like nationalistic in that way, right? And there's this it's amazing how for a society that's probably the least racist society in the world, there's this deep discomfort with any sort of pride or patriotism about your country. Whereas to me, the history of Britain is overcoming those boundaries and those terrible things that happened in the past, whether that's the atrocities committed by the British Empire or slavery, or how generations of migrants were treated when they came in the 50s and 60s. And look at us now. Look how much better society is, right? To me, that's a story to be proud of. And to me, the British identity, like the American identity even more so, is brilliant in this way, because the moment you set foot in America and you say, I buy into the values of your country, I want to pursue my dreams, I want the freedom and the risk that comes with freedom to do what I want to do for the betterment of me and my family. I want to contribute to the society. I want to build things. I want to
Love
invent
it.
things. I want to create things. And I am now an American. And it doesn't matter if you're brown, black, green, yellow, white, whatever. It doesn't matter. The moment you buy into the idea, you become American. And to me, that is what the British culture should be as well.
Yeah.
You don't have to be a particular color or gender or whatever to be British. The British identity should be, these are the things that we believe. But dare ask, Layah, dare ask a normal standard British person, what are British values? They will run away from you like you've just asked them to join the BNP, because that is the attitude that people in this country have to patriotism. To them, any idea of being being proud of your country or thinking that it's actually quite a good country, that it has values that are important, to them, that is scary. That is absolutely scary. And that's something I would love to change. I would love to make it okay for people to have a healthy love for their country in this country, which frankly is quite merited if you compare this country to many others around the world.
Oh yeah, this country, look, the West is great. Well, was great. I don't know where we're going. We'll talk about it in a minute, but absolutely. And I think, so many people, especially from, Eastern Europe, run to the UK, given all the atrocities that we've seen throughout the 20th century and how that is, that is still, it's still sort of existing today, the after effects of it and so on. But yeah, you make a really good point. And the point actually is the difference between multiculturalism and multi-ethnicity and things like that.
Because multiculturalism is a disaster. Multi-ethnicity is something completely different. Yeah,
exactly. And you can't have these conversations. And I think what you said is entirely spot on. Come to a country, add value, build. If you want to make a better life for yourself, please make a better life for yourself. Use the country, soak up everything you possibly can. But don't come to a country and try and impose everything that you're running away from. And if you do want, if it's to be honest, it's kind of like we're getting to a point, even forget immigration, but like just within a society where nobody is able to just accept each other for what they are. Everything has to be imposed now, and I feel even our language is changing. Our language is having to be shifted and imposed. No, it's she, her, it's they, them. It's not just like him, her, done. Everything is gone.
The thing with language is, I've written some articles about this, and again, this will be something I talk about in my book. Do you know where the term political correctness comes from?
No, I actually don't. Tell me.
The term political correctness has never had anything to do with snowflakes and all this other stuff that people like to say. The term political correctness comes from the Soviet Union, and it was also then used in Maoist China. And the point of the term politically correct is to shut someone up. If someone says a blatant truth, you could say, well, comrade, this is factually correct, but it is politically incorrect, which means it is inconvenient to the party for you to be saying this thing that is true, right?
Makes me shake.
So political correctness the point of political correctness is to prevent ideas which are factually accurate from being expressed, to prevent offending or upsetting or challenging the mainstream narrative of the dogma of that society in the present time. And look at the language. I mean, you talk about she, her, and that's a bit of a niche issue, but look at other things. Think about things like tolerance, right? The people who are the most quote unquote tolerant, right, tolerate no opposition to their views, right? The people who bang on endlessly about diversity don't want anyone with a difference of opinion in their space. The people who want a safe space, what does a safe space look like? It's a space in which people like me and you would be unsafe, right? It's a place where people like me and you would not be welcome. When people talk about a welcoming space or being welcoming, what they really mean is this is a place where people who think like us come together to have our conversation. And we don't engage in robust debate. We don't engage in discussion. So what has happened in the last 20, 30 years is all of these words have had their meanings entirely substituted. Tolerance now means intolerance. Diversity now means people with different skin colors who all think the same thing, right? Welcoming now means excluding people, and inclusion means excluding people who don't agree with you. So what has happened linguistically over the last 15, 20 years is a complete substitution of meaning on a grand level. And this is one of the things that George Carlin, who we mentioned earlier, the comedian, he talked about this a lot. He talked about how politicians and political activists and actors use language to misrepresent the meaning of what's happening and to conceal the truth. Conceal the truth. Even the multiculturalism and multi-ethnic, that's why this distinction is so important. A multi-ethnic society is a society in which people from different races come together and live peacefully together under one culture. They're all British. They're all American. They're all Russian. They're all this, they're all that, right? A multicultural society, what that really means is it's not a society. It's disparate groups of people who coexist in the same geographical space, but don't actually have an overarching identity that they can bind themselves into. And that is a recipe for disaster. And that is a recipe, frankly, for conflict. Because if you allow people to live in the same space but remain tribally different, that will inevitably pit them against each other. And that's what we've seen in recent times, particularly every time anything happens in Israel and in Gaza. Suddenly you see that Jews are now being attacked in a way that they've never been. And look, I'm not someone who bangs on about my Jewishness at all. It's not that important to me. I'm not religious. I just noticed that as a very easy example to observe about what happens when you tribalize people and you allow everybody to live in a society that they're not really a part of, that they're not integrating into. It was shocked to me when I went into my local GP surgery in London, and they gave me a leaflet in 25 different languages. And I was like, wait, I thought we lived in Britain, right? I thought we're all here to be British. Now, of course, I'll bring my Russian cynical and dour background into it, and someone else will bring their food, and someone else will bring this and that and whatever. And that's great. But we're all here to learn the language. We're all here to buy into the values. We're all here to buy into a certain mindset. And we have the freedom within that to be different. Of course we do. But we're all buying into a certain set of things. And the moment you don't do that, I think that's a recipe for very dangerous things to happen.
I think your perspective is fascinating because you are an immigrant. That is why it's so fascinating. You're like, don't accommodate for me. Don't change your language for me. I'm happy to accept your values. That is why my family left. I'm really fascinated. I think when it comes to issues on feminism, for example, I feel like because I'm a woman, I'm allowed to talk about it. If you're Black, you're allowed to talk about racism. You're an immigrant, you're literally allowed to say, why do you have all these languages? This is Britain. Find that fascinating. I have a question for you, something which I didn't think I would ask you, but I'll ask it anyway. So you spoke about being Jewish. It's really interesting. My audience, I don't even know if they know or not, but I am Jewish and I don't really talk about it much, mainly because I hate identity politics so much. Hate it with every bone in my body. I think it's an absolute scam, of which I was recently scammed by, but we can talk about that at another time. Oh yeah. But okay, you talk about safe spaces. Now, when we talk about minorities, Jewish people don't fall into that, which is fascinating to me. So, Jewish people don't fall into either the woman, Black, Asian, gay, LGBT. We really don't fall into that left-wing protected bubble at all. Why is that? Not that I want to. I could not care less, please. No one misunderstand me. I do not care. I'm happy just to deal with myself and look after myself. But why aren't we allowed in that protected bubble?
Well, if you think historically about this issue, what is the most oppressed group in the history of humanity?
I don't know. I don't like to answer that question. I mean, I probably know the answer, but I won't answer it. You can answer it.
Well, I'm only asking this because I think it highlights the ridiculousness of the conversation around the issue of oppression, right? I would be saying this very same thing if I weren't Jewish. I just think Jews are a very good example of this conversation. So Jews have been persecuted for 2 millennia, including 70 years ago, an attempt to eradicate all of them from the planet Earth, and succeeding largely in taking out about 40%, I think it was, of the total Jewish population of the world in the space of 6 years. right? So to me, that I mean, that of all the claims to oppression, I would say that's pretty high up there. And by the way, while the Nazis were exterminating Jews in Germany and in Eastern Europe, it's not like in the Soviet Union, where I come from, Jews were loved and revered and whatever. The slogan in Russia was "Kill the Jews, save Russia," right? So this is a minority that has been attacked, beaten, murdered, persecuted for millennia. Now, Jews, as you rightly say, don't seem to qualify for that persecution status, and I don't want it. I don't.
Yes,
want
that's what I'm saying. Neither do I. That's what I'm saying. I don't want
this crap, and I don't see the world through being Jewish. It's not actually that relevant to me. It's interesting to me that this same thing is already happening with Asian Americans in particular, the Korean, the Chinese. And the reason, of course, is that Jews, despite being the most oppressed minority in history, just like the Asian Americans, Japanese Americans were interred in America during World War II. They were literally put in camps, right? And they're literally one of the most high-earning demographics in America. Why is that? Because of their culture, because of their practices, because they value education, they prioritize success. All the tropes about Jewish mothers and fathers, and what a good Jewish girl and good Jewish boy looks like. That's culture, and that culture teaches you that it's important to get a good education. It's important to work hard. It's important to be successful. It's important to make money. All of these things drive a group of people forward and allow them to thrive, despite the fact that they face genuine obstacles in their advancement, right? So the problem that the Jews and Asian Americans and others increasingly face is that if you're successful, you don't fit the identity politics ideology, because identity politics ideology is based on victimhood and it's based on failure, right? If you're not doing well, you are therefore oppressed, and if you're doing well, you can't be oppressed, right? Even if literally half of your people have just been killed, well, you're still doing well because you make a lot of money and whatever. I think it just doesn't fit their stupid, narrow-minded ideology. And so that's why they have to cast out Asian Americans. They discriminate them against Asian Americans in education in the United States. You literally have to have a higher score on your test to go to Harvard if you're Asian American than you do if you're white or if you're black or if you're Latino. So there's active discrimination going on because it doesn't fit into their little identity politics heads, that your oppression and your success level is unnecessarily connected. Because the main point of I think this conversation should be, Layah, is if you work hard and if you do certain things and if you study and you get a good education, you can be successful even if you are genuinely disadvantaged. And instead of telling people you can make it, you can be successful, just follow these steps. Instead, they need people to be quote unquote oppressed. They need people to struggle, because then they, from their elite perch, can look down upon those people and say, I am speaking on your behalf in my £300,000 a year diversity job at the BBC. I am looking after you, poor oppressed person, as I sip my Chablis in a trendy London bar, right? That is what it's about. It's a scam, like you say. It's an industry. Diversity, inclusion, all of this stuff, it's an industry for elite people, mostly elite white people, to advance their own career.
You put that so wonderfully. That was absolutely brilliant. I totally agree with you. It literally is. If you tell somebody from day one that you are oppressed, you are screwed. I saw this video of Mila Kunis and Ashton Kutcher. I don't know if you know the video I'm talking about, but for those who don't know the video, it was terrible. Terrible. This is what happened. They've got two kids, they've got a girl and a boy, and they said to their son that they will always take their daughter to bed first and read her a bedtime story, because outside of their little house, girls don't get to go first. So basically they're saying to their daughter, you are going to be oppressed when you grow up in society. Therefore, we are going to level the playing field and let you go to bed first. You get the kiss goodnight first. I mean, that is so detrimental. It is so unbelievable. I have two brothers, and one of my brothers literally, like, if I say I can't do something, he will scream at me. Like, I'm in trouble if I say I can't do something. If I say, yeah, but it's easier for you because you're a man, I am in trouble if I do that. And that mentality, that alternative kind of brainwashing and indoctrination of you can do anything regardless of what you look like or your gender or anything, has helped me do what I do. Nothing can stop me now, because I don't, if somebody laughs at me for being female or whatever it is, nothing bothers me now, because I know that I can do that. I can do whatever I want to do because I've been told that I can. Literally indoctrinating somebody with the mindset that you're going to fail and society is going to hate you and destroy you, destroys you. And that keeps people hooked.
Yeah, absolutely. And anyone who does that to children, that to me is child abuse. Yeah. Anyone who indoctrinates children with the ideology of failure is abusing that child and is damaging them for life, and is having a huge impact on their life chances as well, because so much of life, not everything in life, bad things happen to good people and all of that, but so much of life is about resilience. It's about the willingness to keep going. And I learned that the hard way, like I said, when I was sleeping on the street and all of these, my life was very, very difficult. But it never occurred to me that I wouldn't be able to turn it around. Even in that moment when I felt so down, I just knew that, that's not my destiny. My destiny is to make a success of my life. And if something isn't happening, I'm not saying it's all down to me, but there is something I can do differently to improve that situation. And if you're not teaching your children that, I think you're not setting them up for the best opportunity in life. So it's good for you to have a brother with some toxic masculinity, I suppose.
Oh yeah, he's full of toxic masculinity. We support toxic masculinity in our family.
Get some of that in.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I really appreciate what you said. I think that's what it comes down to. Meritocracy, pulling yourself up. Nobody's coming to save you. But let's move on to talk about today's world, because we have seen what is going on. To me is really concerning. I don't mean to be doom and gloom, and I really don't want to be. And I do hope that things can turn around, and I genuinely think that things will turn around eventually. But we have seen lockdowns. These vaccine passports are going to be mandatory, and it's odd because you can't have a conversation about this. And for me, it's just so obvious why a vaccine passport is not a good thing. What about bodily autonomy? What about what the left said when it comes to abortion? The left told me that as a woman, I have a right to choose, right? My body, my choice. That's what the left told me. But now the left is telling me that it's not my body, my choice. So what is your take? What is going on? Is there a light at the end of this authoritarian tunnel?
Well, see, I wish that you were right when you say it's the left that want this. I'm afraid it's not.
Yeah, you're right.
I'm sorry. It's not just the left. It's actually quite a lot of people on the right as well. Yeah. It's what we've seen. And look, I know you want this to be a positive conversation, and I am someone who is naturally extremely optimistic about things. Okay. Like we've just talked about, I believe that anything can be overcome. I don't agree with you that vaccine passports are going to be mandatory. We're going to fight, and I think we're going to win that fight. I think they are claiming that they're going to introduce them in order to scare young people into getting the vaccine, which, by the way, my position on the vaccine is like this. If you're elderly or if you're vulnerable for clinical reasons, if I were in your position, I would definitely take the vaccine. Right? If you want to take the vaccine, great, good for you. If you are young and healthy and not at risk, I think you should assess the risks and rewards of taking the vaccine on its own merits. I think the only possible reason to take the vaccine is your own medical needs, right? Your own medical needs to protect you. That is why you would take the vaccine or not take the vaccine. So for an elderly person or a clinically vulnerable person, taking a vaccine makes sense to me on a reward and risk ratio basis, right? For a younger person, I think the choice is more difficult, and people should make their own decision on that. But the vaccine passports, and Dominic Raab, our foreign secretary, said this explicitly yesterday, are designed to coerce young people into taking the vaccine. Now, this is deeply unethical, because what this does is it changes the relationship between the state and the citizen. And the way it does that is, what they're really saying is, we're going to take away your natural rights your right to go to a club or to a pub or to associate with others or to see a play or to see a comedy show or to be out in public or to go to a supermarket or to go to a concert. These are your natural rights, Layah. That's not something Boris Johnson invented and assigned to me and you to be able to do. Those are God-given rights if you believe in God, or natural rights if you don't. Those are things that all human beings have by virtue of being human. And what they're saying is, we're going to take that away from you, not because we need to, not because it's for safety, not because we need to protect you or other people around you. We're going to take those rights away from you because it's going to force you to do something else that we want. And this is completely immoral. It's deeply unethical, and it opens a Pandora's box of gigantic proportions. What about overweight people? If this is about protecting the healthcare system, overweight people put a tremendous amount of strain. And I say this as someone who used to be overweight, a tremendous amount of strain on the National Health Service, right? So do we take their driving licenses away so they have to walk everywhere to lose weight? Is that the next step? Because it's the same principle, right? It's exactly the same principle. So it's deeply unethical. Now, add to that the fact that numerous government ministers said repeatedly that this wouldn't happen. The vaccines minister in Britain, Nadhim Zahawi, said the vaccine passports are discriminatory and that they're not going to introduce them. And he gave my friend Dan Wootton a guarantee on his show that they wouldn't happen. This is what he said. And 2 months later, they're now trying to sell us on this shit. It's completely unacceptable. It's outrageous. But the problem is, and this is where I say, even though I'm optimistic about things personally, and I cultivate, I think, a personal resilience that I think is essential, that we've talked about, the thing that I do find very depressing is not the government. The government are always going to, in the crisis, they're always going to clamp down. They're always trying to take more power for themselves. They will always do this. The thing that bothers me is the public. What we've seen in the last year and a half is that something we've always known is the truth, right? About half the public are, I don't want to use unkind words, but it's hard to avoid. They will panic in a situation of crisis. They will be scared. And when they're scared, they will throw any principles they have out of the window, and they will demand that things happen to protect them. And it does not matter what the principles at stake are. It does not matter what the cost is. It does not matter what the harm is to other people. They will demand that people are forced to do things they don't want to do, put things in their body that they don't want to put in there, etc., because it makes them feel safer, right? And that, to me, is the tragic side of this that we've seen, is half the public are absolutely on board. We've seen polls in this country that show 20% of the public, when surveyed, are in favor of 10 p.m. curfews, even if there is no virus.
Why? Why?
Because in the situation of panic, people will quite happily take your rights away if they think that that makes them a little bit safer. I don't go out after 10 p.m., so no one else should be. I don't go to nightclubs. 30% say they would happily close clubs forever, absent a virus layer. No virus, they still want clubs to close. 30% of the British public in polls say that, right? So what we've seen is the public, in a moment of crisis, in a moment of fear, they reveal their inner authoritarianism. These are the same people who were burning witches. These are the same people who were blaming the Jews for the plague. These are the same people who were saluting Hitler. And I'm not saying they're Nazis at all. What I'm saying is these people are conformists, and in a moment of fear and panic, they will go with whatever bullshit they're being given.
You're absolutely spot on. I mean, the thing which concerns me about Europe is that we don't have the same kind of rights entrenched often as America. So often I talk about America as this free country, and I know America as well is very much at the heart of this huge change and division that we're seeing in society. But America still has their First and Second Amendment. America still has a large population that are going to say no to this. We don't have that kind of mentality entrenched here, and Europe very much is controlled by its past and its authoritarian past. I know it's not all of Europe, but it has those. I was trying to look for the word earlier as well, like those like side effects, like breadcrumbs from the past, and that's what concerns me about the UK. And I wonder if you sort of feel that America's rights are more entrenched, given they have that First and Second Amendment. You know, you come to Texas and you try and tell them to inject themselves with a foreign substance. No, they'll show you their guns and they'll tell you to leave. You know, it just has more. Like I always say, and this doesn't need to get into a gun debate at all. I don't really need to get into that. But I always say, if Jewish people had guns, not just Jewish people, if Germans had guns back in the 40s, I just don't think the Holocaust would have happened, because you even had Germans who wanted to protect Jewish people, but obviously couldn't because they didn't have the means to do that. So I wonder whether you think, you know, their rights are more entrenched just because they have those Bill of Rights.
I do. I do need to pick you up on the Holocaust point.
Go on,
because it's
Go
important. And this isn't. My position on guns is that if I personally don't think that guns in the society make it better for individuals living in normal times, right? I don't.
Okay.
If I lived in America, though, I would definitely own a gun. If you live in a society where guns are allowed, I'm fucking having a gun.
Yeah, it's different. You couldn't implement guns in the UK at all. Right. It's different. Totally, I'm with you. No, I'm with you on that.
But historically, America is what America is, and you're never going to get rid of the Second Amendment. You just have to accept that and live with that. And in that society, I would train to use firearms. I would be responsible with it, but I would definitely have firearms, right? But on the Holocaust point, just very quickly, it's a little bit simplistic, that argument, because what happens in societies that have that sort of authoritarianism and totalitarianism, they don't suddenly declare, you know what, now we're killing the Jews, right? Or now we're taking people off to the gulags. And this is what Alexander Solzhenitsyn wrote about. He said that if we'd resisted, and if every time the KGB came in to take someone away, we all ambushed them in the bottom of our building with axes and guns and frying pans and whatever, they would never have been able to do that. The problem is getting enough people to rise up against something like that all at once when they don't feel personally challenged, right? And so that's really the issue, because look at the thing with vaccine passports. Look how many people now are saying, what's your problem? Look, just take the vaccine. Just take the vaccine. Just take the vaccine part. What's your problem with it? So even now, let's say that everybody had guns, you still wouldn't really be able to do it, because the majority of the public would be on the side of the tyrannical government if the government became tyrannical. So it's a bit more complicated than that. I see the argument. There's some merits to it, but I do think it's a little bit more complex than that. But coming back to America, I love America precisely for this very reason, that it's a country that is not entrenched in a particular way of thinking. They still are trying to work out what is the best way to run a society, and they're not prepared to just throw their freedoms in the bin, because they're a society born of revolution, born of the fight for freedom. And so I think that is something I really admire about Americans. And in Western Europe, we don't have that at all. In France, they're rolling out these vaccine passports. In Italy, they're having punch-ups in parliament about it. In Greece, people are on the streets. But the governments feel very comfortable, I think. And part of the reason, no doubt, is that the people who are out in the streets protesting aren't able to cause anarchy on a mass scale. And look, no one wants any loss of life at all. But I think the government would be a lot more cautious if they were a little bit more afraid of their people. And I don't have a problem with that.
That's kind of what I'm getting at. I feel, you know, potentially, just going back to that Holocaust example, if people were armed, I don't know whether the situation would have escalated or been able to escalate. You know, I know that what happened was very unprecedented. And now we can look back at history and we can take what we learned and we can say, that reminds me of that kind of rhetoric reminds me of that, you know, passports, mandates.
I know. But see, in Nazi Germany, for example, the way you would have done it is very simple. You would have said, well, you know, the Jews are a little bit suspect, so they can't own rifles. And then the Jews are actually a little bit more suspect. They can't own handguns. And then before you know it, the Jews don't have any guns anyway, with the majority of the public going along with it, right? Because the majority of the public won't make a stand on principle. They will only make a stand on what's convenient for them. And I know this is very kind of black pilled from me in terms of the way I'm communicating it. I'm just saying I prefer to face the reality than to have an overly optimistic view of things, even though naturally I'm very optimistic. I just think you have to stare the truth in the face. And the truth is, the people who will give you authoritarianism are not corrupt, evil politicians. It's the half the population who will go along with them. They're the ones that are making it happen. And as long as they're not on your side, even if you have an AR-15, you're not really going to be able to do very much about it.
Yeah, you see, that it's that point, isn't it? Because I saw a really funny video of Boris Johnson the other day. I don't know if you saw the video, but for those watching, there was a video of the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom struggling to open an umbrella. It was hilarious. It popped open, it flipped. It was so funny. And then you look at this guy and you're like, oh my God, you're the person responsible for all this authoritarianism that we've seen. And so two things makes me wonder, like, number one, is that actually coming from you? You seem like an all right bloke, you know? Like, I think we could have a great time. Like, you know, just going for a chat and a drink, whatever. Like, you know, you seem great. Is it coming from him? Is it coming from the people allowing it to happen? Is it coming from the EU? I do know that, you know, this is one of the reasons why people did vote to leave the EU, because of their authoritarian tendencies, which we're clearly seeing with the vaccine passports rolling out across Europe. You know, where do you think these overall this authoritarianism is sort of coming from?
Well, consider this. Think about the British cabinet. I know for your American viewers, this may be a bit of a niche thing to get into. But if you go down the list of the people who are in cabinet, people like Rishi Sunak, the chancellor, the finance minister in other countries, Sajid Javid, Nadim Zahawi, Michael Gove, other people. These are all multi-millionaires who are nonetheless in government. Right, they're taking a crappy salary. They have the official government salary is almost no money to them at all. Right, they're taking a tremendous amount of hatred and flack from the public. They're constantly in the gaze of the media. It has a hugely detrimental effect on their personal lives, on their marriages, on their kids, on their whole thing. So why are they doing this? Like, why do all these people want to be in the governing party? Now, the sort of positive vision is, well, they want to make a difference. They want to contribute to society. Yeah, well, maybe, but, you know, especially with men crave power. You know, these people are there because they want power. They want to be able to shape the future of the world. And that's at the heart of most human beings, right? But these people who already have millions of pounds, they're not going into it to profit financially from some dodgy deal. They're going into it because it's a status competition for power, right? So the fact that Boris Johnson looks and behaves like a buffoon doesn't mean that he is a buffoon. He's someone who wanted to be king of the world when he was 5. This is a quote, direct quote. These people are obsessed with power and they want it. And when they get the opportunity, like the last 18 months, to exercise more of it, to tell more people what to do, to take more freedoms away in the name of safety, and as they see the public cravenly acquiescing to that, they want more and they can do it. And that's why they're there. They're there for the power. They're there for the power. And now they've got it. Of course they're having a good time. And Boris Johnson looking like an idiot is not, that's an act. Boris Johnson is a very driven, power hungry man, just like the rest of them.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, I didn't really take that approach, but I guess you're right. Because to be honest, like, I would love to make a better world, but I don't really, it's not really in me. Like, I don't really have the drive to want to be a politician. For me, I just want to make a better life for myself and my family. So you're right. Like, you can want to make the world a better place, but with that has to come the drive to wanting to be king of the world.
Right. But think about this as well. Like, if you think about this, if you were starting from scratch now, completely from scratch, and you wanted to make the world a better place, would you go into politics?
No, because I feel like with politics, it's a never ending cycle. And even if you do make it better, it will just be undone once you're gone. Right.
But the thing is, you're also very constrained. If you wanted to make the world a better place, you'd invent something that stops plastic building up in the ocean.
Right.
Or you'd help orphans in Africa, or you'd build a church, or you'd build a school, or you'd do something practical, right? And these people are millionaires who could do all of that, but they go into politics, right? Why is that? And the reason is they want the power that it comes with. And so to me, the fact that they are now exercising this arbitrary power that they've given themselves is no surprise. Or why? To me, I'm surprised that people are surprised.
You know, just because we're coming up towards the end, I will just bring this up now because I really enjoyed the conversation. And I think everything that you've said, I really, really agree. You also speak really eloquently, which is really, really important when you're talking about these kind of issues. We need people that can put it forward in a very fair and clear manner. It's really important. But this is actually, you talk about what would you do if you wanted to change the world. This is a huge reason as to why I'm hugely involved in cryptocurrency, mainly Bitcoin, and why that's now the foundation of my life and my career and my, let's say, humanitarian work, because I do regard it as that. It's so wonderful to have something which literally allows you to opt out, something which governments can't control. Like, they can't control your money. The EU want to make cryptocurrency, they want to ban anonymous cryptocurrency transactions. So I don't know how much you know about cryptocurrency, but ultimately they are anonymous.
I told you at the top, remember?
Yes, I know. You lost your Bitcoin. You lost your Bitcoin. You sold your Bitcoin, sorry.
I didn't lose it. I got $800 for it.
Okay, yeah, which would be now around like 60 grand. But anyway, not 40 grand. But anyway, another time. But for me, having cryptocurrency is such a lifesaver. It really brings me so much peace during a time like this. So before we went live, I was telling you I was having a bit of a rant, and my rant was about central bank digital currencies because they are coming, and essentially they will be an extension of the current monetary system, but they will take away any extra privacy or anonymity that we had left, and it's just another way for governments to just basically screw you over. And that is why I find so much peace in cryptocurrency, in Bitcoin. And for me, like, that is where the love comes from. A lot of people are like, I'm in it for the tech. And I'm like, nah, I'm in it for the politics. I'm in it for the freedom. I'm in it for the revolution. Would you ever consider going more down that route in any manner?
Well, it's one of the things that we think about quite carefully at Triggernometry, because while we are not people who put out content that's likely to get banned or likely to get taken down from YouTube. I mean, we do have controversial conversations sometimes, but I think we stay fairly within the sort of Overton window. We're pushing the boundaries of it every now and again, but I think we have a responsible approach to what we do. But the reality is that we don't know what the situation will be. We've seen people banned from various platforms in the past, and obviously, the bigger you get, the more uncancelable you become, right? Like, the point I started was, if anybody said anything bad about me in a newspaper, that would have had a detrimental impact on my comedy career, right? Now I don't depend on anything like that. The only thing I depend on is the existence of YouTube to do our show, and ways to convert that into cash that I can spend. Now, if the government at some point decide to start shutting down bank accounts of people who've got the wrong opinions, you can totally see how an alternative way of paying for things and receiving money from our supporters and whatever would work. So I can totally see. It's just not something that I know enough about. But as someone who understands the context of everything else, it makes perfect sense that you'd want to have a medium of exchange that isn't controlled by government. The only thing that I would say on that front, and again, this may be the black pill element of my thinking, is nothing that allows people to keep money out of the hands of government will ever remain unregulated for very long. They will find a way.
So on that note, and I totally understand where you're coming from, but this is why Bitcoin is so beautiful. And I really use the word beautiful. I know I sound crazy, but I've written a book on this and it's coming out really soon. I'm so excited. You just
I look forward to reading it.
Thank you so much. Likewise, I think the name of your upcoming book sounds absolutely brilliant. That is such a love letter from an immigrant. I think you said it was. It's really, really smart. But essentially, you just can't ban a decentralized network. That is the beauty and the genius of it. Like China, for example, tried to ban it. They shut down mining in many different provinces. Of course, it had an effect on the price, but the price still remained above its all-time high of $20,000 back in 2017. And now miners are literally just moving. They're just relocating, plugging in a different place. And we're starting to see the technology sort of kick back up again, like the hash rate, difficulty adjustment, things like that. We're starting to see that come back and the price is starting to recover. And that is what's so beautiful about it. And I think as well, like, you know, with politics on a grand scale, states, governments, provinces, organizations, companies will have to pick a side as we move forward. And I think we're seeing that anyway. Like, not the entire world has gone into lockdown. Some places, you know, are totally open and totally free. So I do think that some states, organizations, nightclubs, when it comes to vaccine passports, will pick a side. And so that is where the miners, Bitcoin miners, to help secure the network, will move to, should governments really try. I think it's honestly amazing, and it really gives me hope. So yeah, if you ever want to talk more about it, just let me know. But I just want to say thank you so much. Honestly, it's been such a good conversation. Where can people find out more about you, and also what are you up to in the next few months?
Well, I'm at Konstantin Kisin on Twitter and other social media. The show that I do with my co-host Francis is Triggernometry, as in trigger, like a gun trigger. We put out interviews with absolutely fascinating people, everybody from your Jordan Petersons to completely unknown people who have an interesting story. And we also do 4 Raw shows a week, where it's just me and him, 2 comedians, very politically incorrectly joking about the things that are going on and being problematic in all sorts of different ways. So yeah, that I do that. I'm on GB News once a week on Thursdays as well. There's plenty of me if you look. And my book is called An Immigrant's Love Letter to the West, and it's coming out next year.
I'm so excited to read that, honestly. Konstantin, I want to thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure. Guys, please follow Konstantin. He always is offering incredible insight. And I saw that you're on GB News. That is super cool. GB News, for those that don't know, is this new UK kind of alternative-ish media. It's a bit more refreshing than the usual news.
Thanks for having me, Layah.
Absolute pleasure, guys. Thanks for tuning in, and I will see you all next week. Bye-bye.